or a fashionable style of music affect your style of songwriting, or even affect a trusted method that you usually have to writing songs, just because it's fashionable? Sure, it can, but that all depends on what type of songwriter you are, what type of environment you put yourself in as a songwriter, and if you're a person that likes to define yourself, how you define yourself as a songwriter. In Nashville, for example, if you really want to score some goals, you need to have your finger on the pulse, and you need to know what is making a difference in that world, which songs are getting noticed, which songs are getting cuts, which songwriters are fulfilling that current requirement, so that your songs at least get considered by the managers, the labels, and in some cases the artists. How are you going to make that shortlist? How are you going to get your song at least put on hold and considered? Well, you have to have your finger on the pulse. If there's something new that's coming through that has changed how radio feel about the current sound, you need to be on top of that. Otherwise, you got a chance of your track being considered as an album track, not a single. And worst case scenario, well, this is not worst case scenario, but it's the worst case scenario. If your song gets cut on an album, you don't want it to be considered a filler. And worst case scenario, of course, is that it doesn't get considered and doesn't even get listened to. So how do you do that? Well, you need to keep your finger on the pulse. If there's a new sound that's coming in from Georgia that is shaking up the world of Nashville country music, and that changed the songs that were becoming hits, it changed the way radio approached all the songs they were given by the pluggers, then if that's how you define yourself as a songwriter, for example, you're in Nashville maybe, and you want to get that cut, then keep your finger on the pulse. Listen to all the songs that are getting cut on albums. Listen to all the songs, especially the radio hits, because those are the ones that are going to inspire and drive how you go about writing doing your next co-write. Even selecting who you can approach to co-write with. If you're in a position where you get to request who to co-write with, even better. Find the ones who are currently getting some action. So that's if you're in that whole Nashville game, which can be very, 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 very lucrative and very satisfying and fulfilling, I'm sure, as a top songwriter there, getting a bunch of radio singles. Ka-ching. So say, for example, Nashville's not your world, and you just you want to be successful as a songwriter, whether that's as an artist or not. The current trend will probably influence you anyway, because if you are a person that listens to music and new music often, you'll find that the new trends seep in sometimes when you don't realize. And a couple of examples of that, of not necessarily being someone that wants a hit, or not necessarily someone who wants to follow any kind of trend to get a hit, would just be things like the phenomenon that was Mumford & Sons, for example. I think it's wonderful that they've had a worldwide hit, and I think that is because it inspired a lot of younger writers to pick up folk instruments and banjos, and especially banjos, so many banjos. And of course there was the pop thing just before that with all the ukuleles, and it's great, there's these real instruments with strings on them, with a wooden tone, being used in popular music. But I think in the case of song style, forgetting the production, there's definitely been a shift for a generation with bands like Mumford & Sons, and there's a lot of sort of more folk style songwriting leanings to a lot of the new songs that have come through. That's one thing that will happen anyway if you listen to the radio, if you listen to mainstream radio, and even if you don't, somehow it'll get there. Someone will be playing it somewhere, whether it's in your 7-Eleven or in the shopping centre somewhere. You can't escape it when it's a hit. And I guess if you're mindful of it as a songwriter, you can avoid letting it influence your songs if that's the way you feel. I suppose I feel a little bit like that. I'm not interested in writing a song that's been written before if I can help it. I'm not interested in stealing or taking from a current sound just to be current or to cater for some kind of trend. So sometimes it's unavoidable, and sometimes you can be mindful of it and be aware of it and not implement it into your songwriting. An example of when I would do that in songwriting would be if a label or a publisher sent me an artist or a songwriter that wants to write that kind of style, which happens to me all the time. I often co-write with people who don't necessarily write the same music, the same style of music that I write on my own. Happens to me a lot. And so I would absolutely, it's a good reason for me to keep my finger on the pulse, because it could make the difference between me getting a cut and not getting a cut. It wasn't so long ago that my publishers, actually no, it was a band manager, sent someone my way who was a bit more into sort of R&B style pop, but not necessarily too far into R&B. And the music that I make for myself is much more sort of folky, singer-songwriter, Americana, has alt country tags. I've got so many tags on what I do that I definitely put it in that basket myself, because it's been said about me for so many years. But it's a great example of when I was influenced by what was going on around me, and that was that this particular co-writing friend wanted to do something a bit more sort of rhythmic, and I was familiar with the artists she mentioned as references, and so we got down to it, and we wrote a couple songs actually, way over there from where I usually write, but it was fun, and it was because I keep my finger on the pulse when and where I can. So, is it important? Well, sorry about my phone. Is it important? It depends how you define yourself as a songwriter. It depends where you place yourself as a songwriter. Is it recommended? Same again. You choose. I sort of recommend it to broaden your palette of colours. To expand on your palette of colours, I recommend it, because it means you can be a bit more adaptable as a songwriter, whether that's in a co-writing situation or on your own.
All I had, and I ain't asking for it back, but you don't seem to care none about the blood gone bad. That's what buddies do. I took a fall.